UK in a Kindertransport. Now, I was born in a town called Kassel, and that was in Germany, in Hesse in Germany. And I was born at the end of 1931. Now, my parents, they were called Hans, and they were Jewish parents. They were called Hans and Trudy Oppenheim. And they were very sporty people, and they enjoyed a good life. They loved skiing, and the town of Kassel had a lot of hills where they could ski. They loved skiing and hiking, and in the warmer weather they paddled their own canoe, which was called der Fuchs. Do you know what der Fuchs means? No? The fox. It's easy. They paddled it down the river Fulda. Now, my father, Hans, he was actually in the First World War. You know, it began in 1914. And this has got nothing to do with Kindertransport. But that's the toilet case that he had when he was when he was in the First World War. And I'll let you all see it. There's soap in there, and that soap was soap that was used in 1914. So it's almost 100 years old. And they had a wee face cloth. Would you like to have a look at it? Yeah. Yes? Will I give it to you? You can pass it round. And it seems strange to me because my father-in-law, of course, my father was fighting in the German side, and my father-in-law, he was fighting on the British side. And my father was in the cavalry. They called it the Ulanders. And I was told that he was in the Kaiser's Sons regiment. Do you know what Kaiser means? That's like the emperor. And he was in the Emperor's Sons regiment. And I think that was why a whole lot of people, a whole lot of the men couldn't believe what was happening, because they had been fighting for the Germans. A lot of them had iron crosses, but it just didn't make any difference. Now, I don't think my mother went out to work, but my father, he worked for over 26 years in a firm called the Messinghof. It was a foundry, and at the top of one of the hills in Kassel, there's a great big monument to Hercules. And he's holding a big club, and you could climb up inside the club and look all over Kassel. And the club, they were very proud of. The club had been made in the Messinghof, in the foundry where my father worked. But what happened, he had to resign because he was Jewish, and the films, they were Aryanized. And that means that Jewish people were not allowed to work anymore, not there. And I should imagine that round about this time, the Jews were also banned from the local shops and stores. I've got a picture there, you can see it later. And in fact, there it's and it says, Deutsche kauft nicht bei Juden. The German people, they don't serve Jews. So now I had a very happy childhood with my father and mother, and I also went skiing and hiking, and I loved canoeing in the summertime, especially when we camped beside the river. Now I also went skating, and there's a photo there, and I must have been skating, and two Hitler youths came, and I was in the middle, and they skated with me, and I should imagine that my parents were not very happy about that. They didn't know I was Jewish, or it would have been a lot different. Now, I realise now how hard my parents must have worked to give me a normal a life as possible. One or two happenings stick in my memory. My parents and I walking beside the banks of the River Fulda when we met up with a Nazi brown shirt, and he was there with his wife and his small daughter. The daughter was younger than me. Now the husband was carrying a lyre, and he insisted that I should sit behind his daughter when he launched the lyre into the Fulda. By the way, can you hear me all right? Yes? I was terrified that the man had come up to my father and he said, "Your daughter will go sailing with my daughter." But he insisted that I should sit behind his daughter when he launched the lyre into the Fulda. And you can imagine, I was terrified, but there was nothing I could say to make the man change his mind. Now, surprisingly, my parents said nothing. I understand now the pressure they must have been under not to talk back to the Nazi. Now, as it was, they put the lyre in the water, put the little girl in, and made me come as well. And I was so frightened. And as it was, I sat behind the lyre and put my arms around the wee girl. But the little girl would not sit still, and she rocked backwards and forwards onto the lyre until we both fell. We both finished up in the river, and we had to be rescued by our fathers. And my memory is bad, but I'll never forget the bottom of that river. And then when I went back to the castle and saw how dirty it was, it's a wonder we didn't get some awful infection. Now back home again, my father attempted to explain to me how careful we had to be in what we said and did because we were Jewish. I don't know how much I took in. I mean, I must have been quite young at the time. And then came the fearful morning when I arrived at my school to find it being vandalised. I got this picture when I was in Castle, and that is my school, and I do remember it. It's just like I remembered it. You'll be able to come and see it later. Now, there had been a large crowd had gathered to watch desks and chairs, tables and prayer books, slates. I don't know if you know what a slate is. Yeah? Like a small blackboard, but it's in, I don't know what it's made of, slate. And you got these slate pencils, and they screeched when you, it was horrible. They made a sound when you're writing on your slate. And other items being thrown out of the school into the street. It was terrible to watch, and I didn't know what to do. Now I have a picture, that's what I've got, I have a picture from this time, and it's just how I remembered it. A man stepped out of the crowd in front of me and told me to go home. And he said, "It will be a long time until you're back here again." Now, my grandparents, that's my Oma and Opa, they lived nearer the school than my parents. And I began to run down the road to Orsier Apartments in Hohenzollernstrasse, past shops which had notices up reading no Jews allowed in here. And I ran across busy roads. At last, I reached number 59 and climbed up the stairs to where my grandparents lived. My grandmother Oma, was horrified to hear my story. I wanted to go back to my parents, but she wouldn't let me go anywhere. She'd been brushing her kitchen floor, and she chased me around her kitchen table with her brush. And I should imagine she would race out and then lock the door. And I insisted that I would go home. I said, I want my Mootie and Fatty, Mummy and Daddy. Usually it was such fun visiting my Oma and Opa, but not that day. I don't even remember seeing Opa. He was a doctor, and his consulting rooms were in number 59 also. Now, as he was Jewish, he was restricted to treating only Jewish patients, even although he had worked for the Castle Red Cross all through the First World War. At last, Mootie and Fatty arrived to take me home. They were very worried. There's going to be more trouble, my father said. We must go to the Weissen House, that's the Jewish orphanage, to see how we can help. At the Weissen House, the Kinder, that's the children, showed me the fruit cocktail they would be eating for supper. And many years later, I met a kind who'd been in the Weissen House that night. It must have been a Thursday, she told me. We always had fruit compote on a Thursday. Now, my parents had been forced to move out of our house in 27 Auerfeld. Now they took some of the Kinder home with us.